Hi everyone. My name is Heather from Sharebird, a site where top marketing leaders share their expertise. I'm really excited for today's event. We have a fantastic panel on crafting go-to-market strategy. I want to share a couple of announcements before the panel. First, the format for the event. The first half of the event will be questions from the moderator, and the second half will be live questions. There's a Q&A feature on Zoom, so go there to add your questions for the panel and share your questions right away so that others can upvote them. Second, our next Q&A panel event is September 18th on Mastering AI as a Product Marketer. The panel for that event are the Senior Director of Product Marketing at Dropbox and Salesforce, and we're working to confirm the third panelist. You can register for that event at the link in the chat, which I'll drop in just a second. And with that said, I'd love to hand it over to Jack and the panel to introduce themselves and get started.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for having us, the ShareBird team. As the moderator, actually, I'm going to pass the mic to Eric first to introduce himself.
Hi everyone, and thanks to ShareBird for having us. I'm Eric. I lead the global product marketing team here at Asana. Prior to that, I led a variety of product marketing teams at Salesforce for about 9 years. Majority of that time running the SMB group there, and then other companies before that. So that's a little bit about me, and always been in product marketing. So that's like one of the unique things. A lot of people kind of fall into product marketing. I fell into product marketing like a year into my career, so I've been doing this for over 20 years, which makes me kind of a little bit different, weird. I don't know, whatever you want to say. But I love product marketing. Obviously, I've been doing it for forever. So that's me.
Nice. Thanks so much, Eric. I think you're not the only one that just fell into product marketing. I can share a little bit about that later
Awesome.
too. Charlotte, thanks for joining us. I know you're just settling in, so why don't I pass the mic to Maureen to give a little introduction?
Hi, everyone. Thanks to ShareBird for having me today and for hosting this. My name is Maureen Sitterson. I work at Etsy. I was saying right before this, I just transitioned into a new role leading seller growth and retention. So still maintaining seller product marketing. And then I also have a content team, our help center channel, and seller CRM within my remit. But I had been previously leading product marketing across our buyer and seller populations for 4 years at Etsy. Before this, I worked at American Express for 8 years. I was in a number of customer engagement, retention, organic growth roles, and then led go-to-market strategy for the last 3 years that I was at American Express. So kind of two different companies in the past little bit, but excited to be here and talk to you all.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Maureen. On that note, I mean, you're the one panelist today that has the most, relevant experience when it comes to B2C product marketing. So we're going to dig into that a little bit when it comes to crafting go-to-market strategy. Charlotte.
Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here. So I'm Charlotte Will. I lead product marketing at Gong. Product marketing here is everything from core product marketing to solutions marketing, competitive intelligence, analyst relations, pricing and packaging. So it's a wide range. Prior to my time at Gong, I was at Google for 13 years across many different parts of the business. The common thread was product marketing throughout my time there, although I did start in finance and had a finance career before that. But I worked originally on Google Plus, which no longer exists, and that tells you how long ago that was. I led product marketing for Android, and then transitioned to Google Ads towards the end of my time and found my happy place in B2B, though I did B2C and B2B to C for Android. So great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Thank you, Charlotte. And like I mentioned earlier, I fell into product marketing too. I was a founder of a universal checkout API, and when I exited that company, a lot of the VCs I had met along the way started to introduce me to their portfolios And all the projects I was helping out with ended up being in product marketing. Just didn't know it at the time. And then from there, I kind of went actually formal product marketing, helping the team out at Mixpanel, then led PMM at Smart Recruiters, then at Sunbird, where I then eventually became head of marketing, but left recently to do my own thing on the consulting, just get more flexibility. So not as interesting and cool as all your background. So I'm really eager to hear from everybody. And since today's topic is about crafting go-to-market strategy, I think everybody is seeing AI, and when it comes to the core and classic PMM skills of crafting a narrative and messaging, you know, of course, everyone's trying to figure out how do they differentiate in the age of AI. But when it comes to go to market, like let's use that framework to kick us off. What differentiates go to market from core PMM work? What are the skills that people should be developing besides just learning about AI in general and how it applies to their work? Let's go. I'll go back to Maureen to kick us off on this one.
Yeah, I can speak to that. You mentioned kind of the B2C lens and how that's sort of different from some of the other panelists here on in terms of remit. So at Etsy, typically core product marketing is how we focus in the B2C space on the buyer side of things. And that really includes being the person who's like leading market research, leading competitive research, developing personas and really bringing those to life for teams, being kind of like the voice of customer insights and partnering really closely with research and also developing a lot of kind of frameworks for how to think about how we tackle customer problems. And so I think on the B2C side at Etsy, that can seem like more of a gray area and something that can be a little bit less defined than the go-to-market side of things. And so thinking about somebody who would be really successful in that role is somebody who's really a customer advocate who can know the data, know their insights, and really be leading on behalf of our customers to make the experiences that we're building great. And then also deciding who, what, and why are we building this thing and really crystallizing that across the board. And then one thing that's also really important that sits within my team on kind of the core product marketing side of the house is voice of the customer. And so regularly looking at those insights and what are customer pain points and how might we solve them. And so often that comes to life through things that our team is ideating around and really advocating to bring to life. So somebody who's like really influential, comfortable working in ambiguity or white space, and really with a strong analytics and insights background. And then the go-to-market, on the go-to-market front, that's typically on our, B2B side with Etsy sellers. That's typically how that comes to life because we're doing more in terms of building new features and really wanting to explain why they're valuable to sellers and make sure that sellers understand and use them. And so that's really more where like the traditional go-to-market process comes to life. And I would say still important to have somebody who's like comfortable in ambiguity and comfortable kind of like, owning insights and advocating for the customer on that side. But, that I think that the skill set is slightly different in that the go-to-market process is a bit more planful every time we do it. So I wouldn't say it's like a totally different skill set, but we're really just thinking about like, audience segmentation, prioritization, positioning, messaging, and then the full kind of like channel and launch planning process. So it's a bit more straightforward and clear. Okay, product is building this. We're going to stay really close to them as they build it, and then we're going to figure out how we want to launch it.
Yeah, yeah, definitely a bit of a Swiss Army knife and the versatility that's coming across there.
It's a good way of saying it.
Eric, I'm gonna call on you. How about you? When it comes to seeking, go-to-market PMM versus
Yeah. A lot of what you just said, Maureen, resonated with me, even though I've spent my entire career in B2B. which is interesting. I was expecting more differences, but I think it is kind of a simple framework that I think about is our folks when I think about the difference, are folks more like a chief product officer or more like a chief revenue officer? And like in terms of the way that they think. Obviously, my core folks I think align and identify more with like product leadership and go to market more with the revenue leadership. And one's not right or wrong. I think it's kind of a mindset thing. At least I would say for folks that are like earlier in their career, usually one disposition is like stronger than the other. And for me, when I look at kind of core folks, it's a lot more of the creative side of like building a product in partnership with product, writing the messaging, understanding the audience really, really well, and just being an expert and sort of like crystallizing that messaging and narrative to that audience and really having a passion for that. I look for folks that kind of, you know, either write something or create something that's 90% good and then really, really get passionate about that last like 10%, because that's like really where the difference comes in communication, in positioning and messaging and all that stuff. But you kind of have to have that passion for it to get it that far. Because some people just say, "Hey, it's good enough," which a lot of times it is. But in product marketing, I always look for that last 10% for core product marketers. On the go-to-market side, it's a lot more about like getting excited about how the products actually go to market, the whole kind of plumbing of how that works, the optimizations that can happen to really make that meaningful, the way that sellers, you know, a new kind of orientation on a play or a program can, make them 5% more efficient, 10% more efficient. So it is, to Maureen's point, a little bit more analytical. And you also have to kind of come to the plate with a lot more knowledge and background around how pipeline works, how ARR works, and just generally the mechanics of the business.
Mhm.
I don't think it's as black and white as maybe we make it sometimes. Obviously, I have to do both now. Um, and I enjoy both, but I think that's kind of what I look for and my quick hack is like, you know, do you hit it off with the CPO or do you hit it off with the CRO? And and that's kind of like a good place to start because that's where your kind of natural disposition is and you can kind of grow the rest of it over time.
Yeah, yeah. Go to market can span so much, right? There's so many things that you could be doing, and PMM as acting as kind of like the glue between product and sales, you can impact so many areas. I think the challenge also is always you look at that spectrum and decide where can you make the most impact. Also, depending on what your stakeholders can bring to the table. I heard things like, of course, taking a product to market, the launches, right? Persona research, market research, segmentation, VOC, right? Having the comfort with ambiguity. Let's go deeper into go-to-market, right? So, and Charlotte, take a stab at this one. Help us. What's the most memorable go-to-market effort you've been a part of? That, like we said, there's so many things you can tackle, right? Which one stands out to you in from your experience and why?
Okay. So I do want to clarify one thing that in my time at Google and even at Gong, we don't have like the line between what you're calling core product marketing and go-to-market product marketing is blurry. And a lot of the sort of inbound stuff sits more on the product side of the house, and then launching, giving shape to ideas, understanding what it is, positioning, messaging is kind of just product marketing. Um, the a memorable go-to-market effort that comes to mind. So okay, so this was like 8 years ago, which is a century ago in tech timeline. I was at Google. I was leading product marketing, and we were bringing to market a new version of the Android operating system called Android Go. So it was a lightweight version of the operating system. It was a pretty complex like multi-stage launch. For those of you that aren't aware of operating systems like Android, you have to have the OEM, the chipset manufacturer, and the carrier all sort of like line up together and join hands and agree to launch something. So you're working within an ecosystem. I think the things that made this launch memorable to me, are threefold. One is I just remember like solving a real human problem that mattered. So the reason why Google created Android Go was because there was this huge rise in smart feature phones, but they didn't really work. They didn't have the right pairing of the software to hardware, and this was particularly critical in emerging markets and places like India. And I remember this UX study where the user was talking about how at the time there was this huge trend of sending good morning messages. And you would get like these images that people would send back and forth amongst friends and loved ones in the morning. And her phone could not download the image. And so she would just like have to guess with the right response. And I had this like visceral feeling of like the alienation that this person must have felt because her device did not work properly. And that has stuck with me, nearly a decade. I think the second thing was, in my experience, like these multi-phase launches take a lot of, it's a heavy lift, but it's not a one and done to really land something well. And this was something that started with, at the time, Samir Samat was like, we worked with him on the stage at Google I/O to announce that this was coming. So on our stage, then I remember we went to Hong Kong and met with a bunch of OEMs and did a whole bunch of like pitching, and we had this great sizzle reel. And then it all kind of culminated at Mobile World Congress, where we had, launched everything. And the third piece of it was great creative that cuts through. We had this like amazing, looking back on it, I was like, it was an art installation. We took all of these smart feature phones and basically showed how even at a very cheap price, you could have a great experience and lit up their screens and put them on these like movable arms. So like as you walked, the phones would like move almost like a flock of birds. And to this day, that all stands out, in my mind. So I think like solving real problems that resonate, having a thoughtful, well executed, planned out, multi-step launch strategy, and then strong creative that cuts through.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like not enough PMMs give shine to designers, and I think it definitely, adds another layer or amplifies the messaging that we're trying to put out to market. Very nice. How about you, Maureen?
Yeah, I can talk about a memorable go-to-market. We launched a gifting feature called Gift Mode at the Super Bowl last year, so in February 2024. And that feature, the idea for that feature came out of our long-term company strategy exercise where we said, okay, nobody really owns the gifting landscape, and we think we could own it. And so how might we uniquely deliver on helping buyers get the perfect gift when, it really matters and when they don't know what to buy. And so we launched this feature that was powered by AI and basically gave you a number of different ideas for all of these different gifting personas. And some of them were like very uniquely Etsy, like I don't know, like the cosplay person in your life or the nature journaler. I mean, like some obscure personas, but they were all really fun, and it was a really fun feature to use to kind of nail down the perfect gift. And that feature also tackled a pretty typical problem. If you've ever shopped on Etsy, it can be hard to find the exact right thing because there's 100 million items, and so you go in thinking you want one thing and you want another. So, what was memorable about the launch was that we all really we decided we were going to do this in August. We, bought the Super Bowl ad, and then it was like full steam ahead to build this feature and figure out how to market it all at the same time. So it was a really accelerated timeline. We had 4 different product squads working on this. Everybody in marketing was rallying around this one objective. And it was really exciting, and we were on the biggest stage, and we had like full screen takeovers in Times Square the exact feature. And we also had to think about how to articulate in a Super Bowl ad, which is a completely different space than at least I had been a part of before. And then the feature performed really well. We saw really good engagement, but we ended up kind of pivoting it to be more of an embedded part of our gifting shopping experience on Etsy than this kind of like bespoke feature that was on sitting on its own, because we realized like what users really want is a tool to help them narrow down ideas. They didn't want to be kind of shopping in this experience that felt separate from Etsy. So we had a lot of learnings throughout that effort, and it was one of the most fun, interesting launches that I was a part of.
No, very nice. So both Maureen, you and Charlotte talked about a major launch with a lot of sizzle and some sort of major deliverable that made it very memorable. Eric, when I call on you, are you going to share something similar, or are you going to add something different to the mix?
Yeah, I was going a different direction actually. I been in product marketing for a long time, and one of the unique challenges we had to solve at Salesforce when I was responsible for the SMB marketing was just distilling down all the things that Salesforce does for small businesses to really understand it. So not like a big launch, but just like kind of a messaging challenge of how to go to market. And really distilling it down, I think what makes this one most memorable is how it became a narrative within our sellers that was organically used in conversations with customers and internally. So essentially, Salesforce does a lot of things. Um, and at the time, there was, more than 10 products we could sell into small businesses. But really, we kind of took a life cycle approach to what small businesses have to do with their customers, which is, and this was the overall kind of narrative structure was find new customers or find new leads, win more customers, keep customers happy. And that ultimately became the framing of find, win, keep, which is still something that if you own a small business, you may hear from an AE at Salesforce. Uh, and everything kind of fell out of that, right? So like why it's memorable is like it created a structure that built consistency and integration across the entire effort, to the point where, our AEs were pitching with the framework, giving us kind of new ways to pitch it back to us. So we recorded all that. Everyone was certified on this. It also became the framing for our campaign work. Everything was measured in find, win, keep, and those were product groups. And then it just became part of the lifeblood of like that organization. So for me, it's most memorable because it took off organically and stuff started to fall out of it. Like we didn't have to force it in. And honestly, to this day, I haven't found a frame that works as well as that one. So I'm still trying to unseat that one. That was quite a few years ago, and it wasn't my idea. It was someone on the team. Um, but yeah, the thing that's most memorable is like not the sort of the activation itself, but sort of the framing and the narrative that just sticks and brings stuff organically out of it, in my opinion.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think when it comes to launches, I used to like to tell my team that you got to get your everything in-house in order if you expect everybody externally to get on board as well. So there is something to be said about being able to rally and galvanize everybody internally, get them excited, because you know that the probability of something succeeding externally then becomes also higher when everyone's rowing the same direction and taking things to market with consistency. I'm going to throw a curveball, you guys, because these memorable moments, of course, are typically more positive, right? But as we know, when you work on a launch or a more cohesive go-to-market for beyond just one product launch, we know that there are many moving pieces involved. What are the most challenging projects or aspects of go-to-market that you've ever worked on? And just to kick us off, I'll raise my hand and say, I think pricing and packaging is the one that probably gives me most nightmares still to this day. But when you do it well, it's of course very satisfying and rewarding. But yeah, what about you guys? Like, what's the most difficult and memorable in a difficult way? And now, And I'll point back to Charlotte to kick us off.
I have a very immediate response. I think yes to pricing and packaging. That lives in my world at Gong, and so I've lived that experience very acutely right now. But also naming. I believe that naming is the crystallization of product strategy. So there's like a lot that goes into the name. Naming also needs to be done in the context of like the broader product architecture, brand architecture, and having that consistency. So fitting within existing paradigms, nomenclatures, et cetera, is like creates interesting constraints. And naming is also something that everyone seems to have an opinion upon and thinks that they are the expert. So, that to me has like, I spent so many cycles in my career just going back and forth on naming to get it right.
Before I pass the baton to someone else, Charlotte, so how do you end it, right? When there are conflicting inputs when it comes to naming, like what drives the final decision?
I mean, sometimes it's going up to, the CMO or, at Google or, the CEO and founder at my current company to make the final call. So there is that, but there's obviously a lot of like logic that goes into it. I do think it's helpful if you're like setting up principles and you have a clear sense of what your taxonomy is, because then there's like clear guidelines or, like people are already aligned up front in terms of what like broadly what territory we're in.
Mhm.
But yeah, sometimes you just need the head of the person at the very top to make the final call.
You got to have the right framework to start, logic to back up the decision tree, and the right stakeholders in place always, right? How about you, Eric?
Yeah, I was triggered by the naming conversation because I've had like those email chains where you get no context, but like just very cutting feedback. And you have to figure it out. I I think like my examples are sort of, and I'm not going to name like the projects on this one, given it's a more of like a low light than a highlight. Um, Kind of working through launch plans and new product introductions, and getting too far without the right stakeholder input. I mean, this is similar to naming. I think one of the greatest skills you can have as a product marketer is identifying those sort of nebulous or qualitative areas of what you're doing and sort of inducing the feedback early on those sort of things. I've had those projects that come down to the 11th hour and a certain executive just decides that this isn't the right direction or this isn't the right message or this isn't the right audience. Those types of like core pivots, if as a leader, if you can get those inputs 3 months out versus 1 month out, I mean, you're doing your team a huge service. And so I think like the best leaders and folks that bring new products to market know who's going to have a thought on this and are very proactive about getting the right input. And in my experience, that's a lot about getting to like an MVP idea in front of the right stakeholders very early on. So I constantly push my team to like put together a really rough slide, get it out today versus like try to polish it, get it out in 2 weeks. Kind of have to put your ego aside there because it's not going to be perfect. But the reactions that you need, whether it's naming, whether it's pricing, whether it's a new product launch, like what you have to do is get the response and the steer earlier. And then you can make the end product better. And get out of the sort of theoretical conversations really quickly because you don't get the direction in those.
Yeah, planning in advance. I'm gonna come back to that a little later on 'cause it's so important in any launch effort or go to market. But before I do that, Maureen, how about you? Got any horror stories, or we should call it learning opportunities to share?
I definitely agree with both of the things Charlotte and Eric shared. Like 11th hour feedback has happened to me many times. So has like, I don't know, stress or like not being able to align on a name too. I would say maybe not a horror story, but like more of a challenge, I think, is typically when we're building something that we're going to end up launching to customers, it's with customer needs in mind, but sometimes it's something that is, something that's a regulatory or compliance requirement that Etsy has to, get our sellers or our buyers to abide by, or it's something that's going to drive revenue for Etsy and it's good for us, and we need to figure out, okay, what is the value that it's going to drive for customers? And I think that's the hardest challenge that I've experienced. A few years ago, we started to migrate our payments from standalone PayPal, which was available to some sellers, to Etsy payments. And that was like a really hard message to articulate to our sellers. Who, are not like looking at Etsy's financials all the time and figuring out like, okay, what is the benefit for them? Why is this payment solution better for them? It wasn't immediately clear. And so we really had to dig into the complexities of that situation and demonstrate that value to get sellers to adopt this new payments platform. And that was one of the harder launches to really nail. And it ended up going well, but it was much more difficult than a typical go-to-market for us.
Yeah, yeah, accounting for for lack of a better term, the non-sexy stuff. Part of the job, right? Okay.
Exactly. I kind of like the non-sexy stuff, but it is hard.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, well, let's now circle back to what Eric was talking about, right? Planning in advance, getting all the ducks lined up in a row before you go too deep. When it comes to product launches, right? Let's just center on that and dive deeper as part of go-to-market. For a major product launch, and you guys all work at very different types of companies, I think. How long do you start the planning process? Like, what are the milestones you look for and signals before kind of making it more formal and bringing more people in? Oh, I guess I should call on somebody, huh? Maureen went off of mute, so I think she's chomping at the bit. Go for it.
I was like, am I still in the seat? Okay. So that's a good question. So we typically my team is involved like from the very beginning of product development. And I feel really thankful that we have that relationship with our product partners, that they would never start building something without looping us in. And then I think once we get to a place of medium confidence, that's when we start to plan for a launch. And I say medium confidence about, this is definitely going to launch. We're definitely going to talk to our customers about this, and we have like an idea of what we want to say. That's when we would want to give partners a heads up. And we have a lot of rigor around roadmap reviews and calendar planning, just so that we don't do anything that's in conflict with other launches that are happening across the business, and we can really be planful and intentional. And also think about if something's not in conflict, maybe how do we bundle it together with something else to create a bigger story? And that takes a good amount of upfront planning. Um, and then our team from there, once we've kind of like lightly looped in our, marketing channel partners, we develop a brief, we do a kickoff with everybody, kind of ask questions. And then usually we have a couple of checkpoints after that where we're looking at, okay, maybe, the CRM team is doing this and our community team is going to do a live event to promote this new feature. But what's something that could connect those two things even more? And so we kind of do like I don't know, like cohesion discussion to just make sure we're kind of like maximizing input impact across channels and looking for synergies where they are, or kind of creating them if they don't exist. And then I think something that we're working on getting better at, that we haven't historically been great at, is post-launch reporting and iteration. Often because our team has been so lean, we launch and we kind of move on to the next thing, but we want to start to do more of that kind of like long tail adoption, measurement, and iteration in the future.
Yeah, that's a very thorough and thoughtful answer. Thank you, Maureen. And my takeaway from that is a lot of times we talk about stakeholder alignment, but part of it also is workflow alignment, right? How does what we're doing now fit into the bigger picture, perhaps? Or if it is going to change the big picture, how do you make sure that you're not disrupting what other teams are doing, but making sure that they come along the journey. So I think doing that in a very thoughtful manner, of course, makes higher impact, and which is why I tend to think that great PMMs also need to have very high EQ in addition to the IQ to do well at their jobs. Charlotte, how about you?
I think fairly similar to what Maureen had described. I would say the big milestones in my mind, and ideally, like you do have a clear sense of operationally, these are like the steps we go through, and we repeat that over time, and we learn from each one so that it's a repeatable program. Um, well, we have tiering, so we're very close to the roadmap. So like we have lately things are coming up really fast, but normally we have some like visibility into what's on the roadmap and what's coming, way down the road. I think the key thing is getting a strong sense of like timing. When is beta going to happen? When is GA really going to happen? Because that sort of influences obviously the launch plan. Related to that, the first, assuming you've got that all sort of locked and loaded, the first milestone is for my team, really getting to what we call the messaging house, which has a ton of pre-work around like understanding who your ideal customer profile is, who is the buyer, and the different stakeholders sort of like that we need to keep in mind, mapping out the pain and the value props and sort of what is that headline message you have and the supporting pillars underneath, because there's not much we can do with the downstream teams until we have clarity on like actually what it is we're launching.
Mhm.
I feel very lucky at Gong. We have an integrated marketing team. So working with them to help pull in all the right channel owners to figure out like, how do we want to support this launch? So then that's the next sort of phase is kind of like exploration, discovery of what the ideal go-to-market strategy is. And then locking the scope of that is very critical. So once you have a locked scope of like what you're going to do to support the launch, what are the different, key launch moments, and then obviously execution to build out all the assets and programs, including obviously enablement is a huge part of that, launching, and then the post-launch debrief.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, I'm getting pinged by the organizers that we're a little bit over from the planned questions. So I'm being asked to move us to the audience questions, which will be interesting. I think you guys all have access to it, but I'm going to read it out for you. But in fact, the first question that came up isn't really a question. It's just someone saying that they saw Maureen in Atlanta and they love her. So look at that, Maureen. I didn't know that I was talking to celebrities on today's panel, but look at you go. Eric, I'm not calling you for the first audience question, okay? So Steffi, thank you, Steffi, for writing in. Steffi says that she recently realized that as a B2B product marketer, her team doesn't actually get much opportunity to work on true go-to-market strategies. They lead product launch and launch strategy, but not so much overall go-to-market. What are your thoughts on this, Eric? How can she and her team get more opportunities to get involved in the go-to-market strategy?
Yeah, that it's a little tough one to answer without knowing the intricacies of the size of the company, the industry, all that stuff. But I think my short answer is relationships is usually how you sort of get into go to market if you don't have influence there. I think for me in B2B especially having credibility and like strong relationships with revenue leadership is how you build that as well as the marketing leaders that sort of drive campaigns and integrated marketing and the whole nine yards there. But I think kind of coming to folks and stakeholders within the go-to-market processing, looking for opportunities to improve it, and then trying to tie the product marketing efforts into the improvements in the overall go-to-market. If you don't have a seat at the table and assuming that you don't have executive sponsorship to sort of bring you into those, and looking at this more organically, I think it's looking at the broader go-to-market, looking for efficiencies, looking for areas where key leaders that are influential in that in that process are looking for improvements, and then thinking about how you can put your team in the right places to solve for those. I think once those relationships become stronger, then it becomes more casual and organic to bring you into organic. I think sorry, to bring you into go to market. I think the best kind of go-to-market relationships are the ones where you're sort of calibrating what you're doing, in Slack, not necessarily in formal meetings every 2 months. And so to me, that only comes with relationships and trust. And that trust is based on the fact that you are actually trying to improve the outcomes of the overall go-to-market, and you're not just trying to insert yourself. So without knowing more, that's my quick answer there. I think it's about relationships with the go-to-market leaders.
Yeah. I'd like to add to that a little bit. I think when I look at whether it's my clients or even companies I've been at before, the teams the PMM teams that kind of sit there and are wondering, hey, how can we bring more to the table? Usually it's because the product strategy and roadmap is single-threaded, as in decisions are being made based on either which client or customer is screaming the loudest, right? Market trends that the company's very excited by, or something that aligns to the vision, and they're like, okay, we're gonna do this. Or it is, hey, what's the team strong at? Let's double down and keep investing. But it's rarely a combination or a healthy balance of the three. And I bet that regardless of company size, not every PMM product sales team is kind of doing all three well. Advice back to that question is, what is your team not working on? I mean, not just your team, but the company as a whole. Bring that to the table. I think voice of the customer is always irrefutable, but bring the other elements that aren't being considered so that it becomes another factor and input into decision making. Marie and Charlotte, anything to add on that question?
I think Eric touched on just like the importance of like really building relationships. I think I would just say totally agree with that. And that's been my observation. Like anytime it's kind of like hard to get involved in something that you want to be more deeply integrated into, just starting with trust and building really strong relationships, and then also demonstrating and articulating like what the unique value of product marketing is, and also what your contribution is. Somebody, a former like mentor of mine, gave me that advice to kind of like explicitly state like why I'm sharing that particular perspective in a meeting. And it sounds, maybe like obvious or like a small nuance, but I think sitting in a product marketing role where you're kind of like, in the middle of all these different teams that are doing disparate work, typically saying like, from my point of view as the person thinking about, our customers' sentiment or whatever your unique role in that room is, just naming that and explaining like the why behind your saying something, I think helps a lot too.
Yeah. I'm gonna switch gears for a sec, and I'll call on you first, Charlotte, to AI. It was part of the questions that we were supposed to bring up anyway before we ran out of time, right? In terms of what AI tools have you guys incorporated into your teams and jobs? Maybe we can answer that in the written format afterwards. But one audience member asked, "I'd love to hear your insights on vibe coding, creating prototypes by non-technical marketers. Have you seen any transformations before and after implementing vibe coding in your organization?" And Charlotte, even if it's not vibe coding, maybe we can fall back on other AI tools that your teams have started to use that is adding value.
Yeah, I would say not like, at least from a marketing perspective, I haven't seen fast prototyping yet with vibe coding. We just did a massive revamp of our website and getting it off of WordPress and onto like the latest and greatest technology has been a game changer. So I'm seeing other ways in which technology is helping. But in terms of AI broadly, I think there's there's obviously a lot of different use cases. There's one that I am very excited about that we're doing that relates very much to what my company Gong does. We are taking all of our Gong customer calls and auto-generating battle cards off of that. And not only is that saving a lot of time versus manually constructing the battle cards, and we have it all set up to a standardized template, so it's easy for the field to kind of go from one battle card to the next. But being able to capture literally like the winning words of a closed won deal is so powerful because it's a proven success. So that's something where you're taking like what's actually working and automatically pulling it in to create an asset in a matter of like hours versus what would have taken days, maybe weeks.
Very cool. Eric, anything to add there? Any cool AI tools or vibe coding projects that you've taken on that's been game changer?
We have started to do some prototyping with product in that regard, and I haven't used it myself, but I've seen folks using I think Figma has something where you can kind of describe what you want and it actually mocks it up. So I'm starting to see that a little bit. I think it's pretty powerful when you think about, hey, instead of us talking about like, hey, we might build this, like actually looking at what it might look like to sort of get you to the like kind of starting with the end in mind. So I think that's cool. I also agree with Charlotte's take on the customer calls and what you can get from that. I mean, it wasn't too long ago that we as PMMs had to like talk to salespeople for hours on end or our customers hours on end to get like one nugget of insight. Like the amount of insight that's now transcribed is crazy. So if you're not like using AI to sort of scrub calls and actually like do that, that's a miss. Like that again, like it wasn't too long ago that we had to have actual conversations to get these insights. So like
Yeah.
that's definitely something we should take advantage of as product marketers.
There's a burning question in Q&A with 11 upvotes, so I gotta take us to this one. It's an interesting one. As someone who has helped aspiring PMMs land roles, I'm always so confused what PMM hiring managers are really looking for when they asked the candidate to present a go-to-market deck as a take-home assignment. My clients have spoken to strategic launch tiers, success metrics, etc., and still have not landed roles. What are you specifically looking to see when asking a candidate to deliver a go-to-market deck? So before I call on somebody, a quick show of hands. Do you give take-home assignments in the form of, oh, look at you. Okay, everybody. Oh, wow, you guys are tough. Let's start with you then, Maureen.
Yeah, I can speak to this. I think it's a really good question. We always have a take-home assignment because what we've realized is that's a like really critical way to assess whether somebody can do the work. I think it's possible to be really good at talking about doing the work without actually demonstrating that you can. And I can speak to, I mean, I'm sure that has happened a lot to people applying for jobs. I can speak to kind of like more broadly what we look for. I think somebody that does that homework assignment really successfully has very clearly deeply immersed themselves in the Etsy experience and, dug deep into our listing pages and what the shopping experience feels like, or looking into our seller experience and what all of those dashboards look and feel like, what's good about the app, what's not good about the app, and has like really done their homework and comes with a couple of ideas that are net new to us that demonstrate that they've done that. I think, yeah, like at a baseline expectation is that you've kind of completed all of the elements of a go-to-market strategy that I would expect to see from somebody. So that's to me more of like the foundational, like check the box, yes, you could do this job. What makes somebody really stand out, I think, is like coming to the table with like a really big net new idea that demonstrates that they've done that.
Mhm.
And and I would say also somebody what I've seen in people that have been successful is like, hey, I don't know the data metrics that you guys look at on a day-to-day basis because I don't currently work there. But here's what I would look at if I were a PMM at Etsy. That's also something that I think has demonstrated somebody who's like really thinking outside of the box and thinking ahead to, okay, if I had the job, here's what I would do.
User customer empathy, understanding the OKRs, the objectives and metrics, and working backwards from that to tailor the go-to-market presentation. Eric, how about you?
Yeah, I think I'd be lying if I didn't say that like every sort of product marketing presentation, the first thing I'm looking for is positioning and storytelling within there and how they build a narrative. I think it's so critical for all product marketers, whether they're in go-to-market or core, to be able to convince people of things, whether it's internal, external. And so I look for just the overall flow of the story. Does it make sense? Is it compelling? All of that stuff. I think one mistake potentially go-to-market folks do make when doing this exercise is thinking about it's all just about the content of the presentation. And if you're applying to a product marketing team, I think, at least in my perspective, the first impression is going to be your storyline and how well you build a narrative and how well that tracks. So that's one thing. I think Maureen hit on this, but like just the general things, like if you ever took a business class in college, like what are the dynamics of an offering going to market? Like, do you understand the competitive space? If you thought about the customer, market dynamics, like all of that stuff, really look for folks that have thought about that and gone deep in there to really understand the implications of their decisions and not just sort of activating a bunch of tactics. Um, and then I would say like the third thing is grasp or understanding of different sort of go-to-market like craft, I would say. So like whether that be working with sellers and outbounding, whether that be like campaigns, pricing and packaging metrics. Most candidates aren't like deep on all of them, but like most of them have a couple that they really go deep in. Um, so I think like to answer the question, I feel like maybe when people go wrong is like they get too much into like the nitty-gritty of just like the details and don't think about like how they're gonna because for me when I'm watching a go-to-market presentation, I'm thinking, hey, this is gonna have to go to our CRO, this is gonna have to go to the campaigns team. Like there's a lot of people you're gonna have to convince about like why to do this, and do you have the passion? Have you built out the narrative in a compelling way, in an interesting way? And maybe since it's like not a core PMM role, some people don't think that's important. But for me, that's always important with a product marketing presentation.
Yeah, absolutely. Got to find a way to make it memorable so that it's almost like the narrative construction, the storytelling aspect has to be, even though it's a checkbox, it's probably the most important one that'll help you stand out amongst other candidates, right? And then it's the rest and making sure you're highlighting your skills on the ones that you focus on, but not every single nitty-gritty detail. That's great. Charlotte, how about you? What do you look for?
I think the positioning and messaging is that's something that is a must have for any role. And to everything that Eric and Maureen have said, like in order to get that right, you have to immerse yourself in understanding the products, the competitive landscape, the business. Having that commercial mindset is also really important. And then, obviously there's, standard sort of approaches. I think the question mentioned like tiering launches, et cetera, KPIs, but it's showing that you've spent time really thinking about it and have gone into the nuances of what makes good positioning and messaging.
So thoughtfulness, making sure that the presentation's actually been tailored to the business and not just some
Yes.
generic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations to all three of you. If you have any job openings, you're going to see your applicant volume quadruple in the next few days, perhaps. Sorry, I had to make that silly dad joke. Okay, another question. Okay, this one definitely is more about stakeholder alignment, right? Sarah asks, she's a mid-level PMM for a mid-sized company. A lot of her energy is spent trying to align different teams and stakeholders. Any tips for softening siloed departments? And why don't we start with Charlotte here?
I think it's one strategy that has worked well for me is number one, taking the time to find like the common ground between the two teams. Like you both care about X. Then identifying where the breakdown in communication is happening or the breakdown in alignment. So getting crisp on like what is the problem to solve. And then literally getting them in a room. I've even like facilitated workshops before where I have like one part of go to market and product and we're, trying to work through the problem together. But if you're aligning on the North Stars and the common ground and the common values, that helps pull people together. And then if you're focusing concretely on like, this is where the breakpoints are happening and why it's a problem, that can help. But certainly it's at the heart of all of that is communication and investing in the time between all the teams.
Eric, how about you? Thank you.
I think Charlotte answered that pretty well. Like I know we're on limited time, so I'm not gonna say all the things that Charlotte just said again. I thought it was a good answer.
That's fair. Anything else to add to that, Maureen?
I think she covered it.
Yeah, you know what's funny is I was talking to somebody recently where the CRO and the chief product officer both are just begging product marketing to do more. And so, because when I saw that question, I was like, well, is leadership aligned? Usually, because it trickles down, right? And when you have support at the executive level, it's a lot easier to make things happen. And so, in lieu of that, I think Charlotte, you gave a very good response. You simply have to take the time to meet with every individual and stakeholder, and get them on board. And it might be tiring and taxing, but it's worth the effort in lieu of, having the executive team working in harmony and making sure that there is a spot for product marketing to add value. Okay, 2 minutes left. I think, yeah, we have actually, no, we are out of time, so I should hand it back to Heather for closing announcements. For all the questions that we didn't get to, we'll try to get to them in a written format for the audience members. So thank you again for engaging with us and with the panel. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys. Thank you to our panel and to our moderator. We work really hard to curate the best product marketing mentors for you to learn from, including the people on this panel. So when you're ready for your next job, I recommend you looking for jobs on their teams. If you had a question that wasn't answered, you can search thousands of answers on ShareBird or ask it on an upcoming ShareBird AMA. And as a reminder, again, our next event is on September 18th, Mastering AI as a Product Marketer. And you can register for that event at the link in the chat. I'll drop that in there again. Lastly, if you have any questions or feedback from us, please email us at events@sharebird.com. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Thanks.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much.